Good day, everyone. I'm Sharan, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. On behalf of Barrow, I would like to welcome you all for today's webinar from Barrow Insights. So, in today's webinar, we will have our presenter discuss and analyze how a prevalent pricing model in the field of consulting could help in a win-win situation for a buyer and a supplier. So before we move ahead with the presentation, I have some general set of instructions as always. Please note all attendees will be placed on mute. During the course of the presentation, if you would like to post any questions, you will find a box on the right-hand side of the panel in the screen, which you see it's indicated here. I request you to type your questions and hit the send button. And as the presentation progresses, I will ensure to take a note of the high-frequency questions and will post it to the presenter at end of the session. If you're experiencing any connection issues, I request you to close the window, go back to the email, and try to connect using the same link, which is also reflected here in the slide that you're seeing. If you still face any problems, I request you to please drop a quick email to Puneet at puneet.ramal@barrow-inc.com, which you find it on the screen as well as in the email that has been sent across to you. So, moving on, let me quickly introduce to you the speaker for today. He's Ravi Teja. Ravi Teja specializes in providing management consulting related procurement intelligence to Fortune 500 companies with whom we work with. He has built extensive knowledge and expertise in this category, and with the help of that, he supports projects across industries like pharmaceutical, consumer packaged food industry, to name a few. He has written several articles which include, to name some, establishing a spend approval process in sourcing consulting services and improving buyer maturity in sourcing consulting services. So, further on, let me pass it on to the presenter who will take you through the topic for today's webinar.
Thank you, Sharan. The world of consulting has always seen its own way of pricing services, where the buyer has a very limited control on the price and also limits the boundaries for negotiation. There are ongoing debates and discussions on what would be a best suited pricing model which could provide a win-win situation or be mutually beneficial. So, in today's webinar, we will try to understand the model that is slowly becoming prevalent in the industry and also analyze how it is implemented and what are the benefits the buyer could obtain out of that model. The model we'll discuss and analyze is the outcome-based pricing model. So, to help you understand this model and its significant impact, we will cover the following in our presentation today. First, we would understand the approach on how outcome-based pricing is implemented. Following which, I would highlight and discuss on certain yardsticks for measuring the consulting projects, like whether it is qualitative or quantitative. Then, most importantly, we will try to ratify it with case examples which would help to validate this particular approach. And finally, we will come to the dependent conditions on how to utilize this outcome-based pricing approach. Now, let us just pause for a moment and try to understand what the management consulting industry is really all about. Management consulting is the practice of advising the organization to understand their current problems and provide solutions to improve their performance. It basically consists of 5 service lines such as information technology consulting, operations consulting, strategy consulting, human resource consulting, and finally finance consulting. For each of the aforementioned services, consultants are hired and paid by using various pricing models. Now, let us see how consulting firms are typically charging in providing these services. The current models of operation are time and material, where the pricing is charged on hourly basis, and fixed fee, where a lump sum amount is paid to the consultant after completion of the project. However, there are a few disadvantages associated with this model. The first fallacy is that there is absolutely no linkage whatsoever between the payment and the result, which is sure to hamper the productivity of the buyer. In short, the buyer has no idea on ROI of each of the consulting projects. Moving on. Consulting spend is huge, which is on average around $100 million, and there is constant pressure on the buyer to derive savings out of it. No buyer will want their budget to overshoot, which is happening time and again with the traditional model. Another most prominent challenge is the maximum risk bearing on the buyer. Buyer needs to bear a maximum amount of risk with the traditional models, as they have to pay for the entire project irrespective of the value being delivered. Now, having spoken to various industry experts and buyers in the last year, I have seen that outcome-based pricing models mitigate all these risks associated with the traditional models. So, let us dwell deeper to understand how different is this model. The outcome-based pricing model has been defined as a model wherein a part or whole of the compensation is paid to the consultant depending on the outcome of the project. With regard to global adoption of outcome-based pricing, this model was being adopted in 20% of the consulting projects in America and Europe currently, which constitutes about 85% of the consulting market. This adoption is expected to reach 35% by 2017. So, if a buyer is engaging in 100 projects, 35 of them would be engaged through outcome-based pricing, which represents a major shift in the coming years. Moving on to the service line adoption, strategy and HR consulting are expected to use outcome-based pricing in 10 to 15% of their projects, and operations, finance, and IT consulting are expected to engage in 25 to 30% of their projects in the next 2 years. Moreover, the top 4 industries buying consulting services such as banking, CPG, pharmaceuticals, and energy sectors are expected to increase their adoption of outcome-based pricing by more than 10% in the next 3 years, signifying its growing impact. Let me share an interesting fact here. Global procurement managers have increased their use of outcome-based pricing in their projects by around 40 to 50% in 2014, according to a consulting survey. This clearly signifies a radical shift towards the adoption of outcome-based pricing model. Let us now analyze how this pricing model works. Outcome-based pricing basically consists of two ingredients, which is the base fee, over and above which comes the variable component. Base fee is charged using the traditional model, whereas the variable component, which is our primary focus, would be charged through outcome-based pricing. This variable component is subdivided into two components. The first component is projects measured through qualitative parameters, and the second component is projects measured through quantitative parameters. On average, strategy and HR consulting projects go better with the qualitative parameters, with variable components ranging between 20 to 50%. Whereas operations, finance and IT consulting projects go well with the quantitative parameters, with their variable components ranging between 10 to 40%. Our research analysis shows a significant finding that more than 50% of the strategy and HR projects are measured using qualitative parameters, and more than 40% of the operations, finance and IT projects are measured through quantitative parameters, which validates our analysis. However, ultimately it depends on the type of the project, irrespective of the service lines, in determining whether to go for a qualitative or quantitative approach. The buyer can utilize a mix of qualitative and quantitative approach depending on the clarity of deliverable of that particular project. First, let us see how the quantitative approach works. Before measuring the outcome of a consulting project through quantitative measuring, there are few prerequisites which the buyer should keep in mind. First, they should identify the key parameters that should be evaluated in the project. The next step consists of assigning a weightage to each of the parameters depending on their importance in the project. After this, we arrive at the expected target and the actual value of the parameter according to the buyer's need. Finally, the percentage of target achieved is calculated. Let us take a hypothetical example wherein we have an operations consulting project. The first step is to identify the parameter such as capacity improvement, which has an assumed weightage of 20%. Let us assume the expected target as 25 and the actual value as 15. The percentage of target achieved is calculated as the ratio of actual value to the expected target multiplied by 100. The value score of the parameter is calculated as the weightage of that particular parameter multiplied with the percentage of target achieved. This process is applied to all the parameters within that particular project, and a cumulative value score is obtained, which is the sum of value score of all the parameters in the project. Now, under the quantitative section, we need to understand how the value score is linked to the payment. This is a sample value reserve which assigns a percentage of variable component to each of the value scores. This varies from project to project depending on the mutual agreement made between the buyers and the suppliers regarding the project. For instance, if the value score is more than 100% and the buyer is happy with the results, he would pay 100% of the variable component plus an additional bonus. However, if the value score is less than 100% and the buyer is not so satisfied, he would pay anything less than 100% of the variable component depending on the criticality of the project. The key outcome here is this would result in huge savings for the buyer from each of the projects compared to the traditional models. Now that we have seen how the quantitative approach works under this pricing model, I'm sure you might all have a question in mind. Has this been followed by many companies? Let's see this with the next few case examples. This example is based on a recent conversation that I had with the CPO of a leading manufacturing company. This company performed a capacity improvement project with a major operations boutique firm using the outcome-based approach. The project size is estimated to be $5 to $6 million. The key parameters and their benchmarks decided are inventory turnover to be increased by 15% after completion of the project, cost of goods sold to be decreased by 5 to 10%, and lead time to be decreased by 10%. These three parameters are attached to a variable component of 18%. The final parameter is increase in overall capacity with the benchmark to be increased by 10 to 15%, and this is attached to a variable component of 12%. The consultant exceeded the target of the buyer and received 100% of its variable component, and making the buyer realize a huge savings of $1 million. Moving on to the next example. This is based on a discussion with a procurement manager of a leading Fortune 500 company. This company performed a restructuring project with a top-tier consulting firm using the outcome-based approach. The project size is estimated to be $12 to $14 million. The key parameters and their benchmarks decided are reduction in FTEs holding management titles from 40 to 20%, increase in average span to increase from 3.5 to 6.2, HR spend target to be reduced by 40%, and the time period for implementing this project to range between 18 to 24 months. A variable component of 30% is attached to all these parameters. The consultant met 80% in the value score and received 90% of the variable component, making the client realize a huge savings of $3 million. Now that I have taken you through the quantitative approach, let us see on how the qualitative approach works. Qualitative parameters in a consulting project are evaluated through stakeholder feedback, as they are expected to play a pivotal role in managing the consulting spend. Each of the consulting projects are evaluated on 5 parameters such as delivery and output adoption. How is the output delivered useful and impactful to the buyer? Moving on, expert input. What are the knowledge assets added by the consulting team during this project to the organization? Development of human resource. What is the impact of the deliverables on the behavior of the people in the organization? Cost control. What is the estimated cost saving that is achieved by the organization after completing this project? And finally, team involved. What is the amount of partner and managers involved in this project to deliver a quality output for the buyer? Stakeholders need to rate each of these parameters on a scale of 5, where 1 denotes below expectations and 5 denotes exceeded expectations, and an average value score is obtained. Similarly, we can link this value score to the payment for a qualitative model as well. Let me show you how. Any score of 1 which is below expectations, there is no fee reserved to the consultant. Whereas any score of 3 which is meets expectations, there is 100% of fee reserved to the consultant. Any score of 5 which is exceeds expectations, there is 100% of fee plus an additional bonus that is being given to the consultant. Here is a case example that elaborates on this approach. A CPG major performed a long-term strategy project in improving its margins in a period of 3 years. The project size is estimated to be $6 to $8 million. They identified that their stakeholder satisfaction is of key importance than any other parameter in this project. So, they requested a stakeholder feedback on the parameters such as expected impact of the outcome on the margins of the company, key knowledge assets added during this particular project, and finally, satisfaction level of the consulting team by the buyer. These parameters are attached to a variable component of 10%, and the stakeholders are requested to score each of these parameters on a scale of 5. The consultant got an average score of 3 and received 100% of the variable component as per the agenda. This made the buyer realize a huge saving of $1.5 million. My rationale behind citing these case examples is to validate the hypothesis which we have provided earlier regarding the outcome-based pricing model. However, a query which arises is this model applicable across all projects for all the buyers? No. Buyers must remember that this model is not a one-size-fits-all billing model. There are certain parameters which buyer needs to look before opting for outcome-based pricing. Let me cover each of them one by one. Talking about scope of work. Are the deliverables clearly defined by the client? Does the buyer know what exactly he wants from the project? If no, buyer needs to bring in more clarity in order to utilize outcome-based pricing. Moving on to buyer involvement. Is the buyer looking for more control and take riskier decisions through the outcome of this project? Then definitely buyer can opt for the outcome-based pricing approach. Moving next to buyer-consultant relationship. Is the buyer familiar with the consulting supplier in doing past projects? Is he having a mature relationship with the supplier? This needs to be considered before opting for outcome-based pricing. Next important parameter is revenue and value. Will this project result in potential benefits and drive revenues for the buyer? If yes, outcome-based pricing is definitely the way to go and avail the complete value out of the project. Another important parameter is transparency. As the buyer is attaching certain part of the payment to the outcome, he needs to have regular updates regarding the project progress to make optimal use of this model. The last and most important parameter is the internal structure of the organization. The maturity of the procurement team and the support from stakeholders will definitely impact and play a major role in implementing the outcome-based pricing within the organization. So, outcome-based pricing is expected to play a significant role to minimize the risk and avail high benefits from the suppliers in the market. To summarize, there are three key points that buyer has to keep in mind while implementing the outcome-based pricing. Firstly, identify if a project is suitable to implement outcome-based pricing using the parameters discussed. Following which, identify the value indicators which are important and link it to the rewards after a mutual agreement with the suppliers. By doing so, buyer can ensure achieving better cost savings through mutual risk sharing. All said and done, we understand that outcome-based pricing is currently one of the preferred pricing models in the field of management consulting. However, with this industry being very dynamic, we might expect more innovative pricing models to replace outcome-based pricing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. I think your presentation did give us an insight and also helps us understand how outcome-based pricing is becoming prevalent in the industry and what are the benefits and how it significantly impacts the cost savings for any buyer. And I'm sure and agree with your point that the industry being very dynamic, we will definitely see more of innovative models coming into picture in the future, which is going to make things better for the buyer and supplier. Like I mentioned, definitely it could result in a very good win-win situation for both of them. Thanks, Ravi. So we have a couple of questions that have come up during the course of the presentation, and Ravi, let me pose them to you, and it'll be good if we can take it one after the other. So one of the questions that we have here are, you did mention about the outcome-based pricing model and what are the benefits for the buyer. But what are the benefits that a supplier could get out of an outcome-based pricing model? One. And in relation to this question, we also have another follow-up question which says, would they agree to such a kind of model? Yes, we did see buyers can benefit, but will suppliers really go in for such a kind of model?
Sure. To answer your question, this model is not only beneficial for the buyers, but equally beneficial for the suppliers as well. There are three things which I can think of currently regarding the benefits. Coming to the first point, the supplier will definitely be highly motivated to get that extra bonus wherever possible within the project. That would drive him to move and adopt this outcome-based pricing approach. Another benefit which I could think of is this model will definitely help the suppliers to differentiate themselves in the market. We understand that the consulting market is really fragmented with many suppliers. So this outcome-based pricing approach will provide them as a differentiator and innovator in the consulting market, which would definitely motivate them to adopt this approach. A final point would be increasing the scope of business. Once a client is satisfied with a supplier on using the outcome-based pricing, he would definitely be interested to utilize it with the same supplier, which will increase the scope of business for the supplier.
Thanks, Ravi. I think it did give some insights as to how suppliers will benefit out of this model as well. So another question that we have is around what are the risks that is associated with this model? So could you throw some light on that, please?
Yes, having thought about all the benefits of outcome-based pricing, there are various risks also that can be associated with this model. Uh, First thing would be designing of the performance metrics. If the performance metrics are designed in a wrong way, that might lead to a wrong behavior to the overall project and might result in loss of savings to the client as well. So that is one key important point. A second risk which I can think of is the time and effort needed to monitor the performance of this particular model. Here is where procurement will come into picture and monitor the time and effort needed to monitor this outcome-based pricing model.
Okay, thanks, Ravi. I think apart from these high-frequency questions, we have a couple of questions from our audience, which we will send across in detailed answer via email to the respective individuals. And the analysts will get in touch in providing those inputs as well with respect to your questions. Thanks a lot for sharing your questions and your inputs. This is definitely valuable. So that wraps up the presentation for today. And thanks for joining. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks for a very insightful session. Thanks once again for one and all for being part of today's webinar. Until we meet next time, we sign off. Bye and have a great day.